What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights, where I am your host, Matthew Raridan. And man, we have had a very busy and exciting last 24 hours here in sports. There has been breaking news after breaking news, and we are here to cover those breaking news for you and to let you guys know what's going on, our input, our opinions, and where things are going on. We have ourselves a busy slate ahead of us. We've got the fresh college football rankings. We have a lot of breaking news going on in the NFL right now, injuries, trades that happened, and just it's everywhere. And we had a fresh verdict and arrest on an NHL actually hockey topic that I'm sure you guys all know about. But I'm gonna go ahead and introduce my host here. First, we've got David Street. We're up in the Florida Gators gear. And we also have Ed Smith rocking, is that a Brett Favre gear? It looks like we got on. So you got to love Brett Favre right there. But let's go ahead and dive in here first. I wanted to talk about a specific issue here. And I won't say necessarily it's an issue, more of a topic that's going on in the NFL, and it's happening right under our eyes right now. And that is, are we possibly seeing the best, worst team ever to perform in the NFL? And if you haven't guessed already who I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't look now, but they are 6-3. And I feel like they could possibly be the best, worst team ever. And here's where I look at things more. We're going to look here at the stats. The Steelers have been outgained in every single game so far this season. That's 9 games that they have been outgained in yards per game. But let's also look at their quarterback, Kenny Two Gloves Pickett. Yes, I call him Kenny Two Gloves because he does wear 2 gloves, and it has always been talked about and widely speculated why he wears 2 gloves. But hey, Big Ben did the same thing, and it worked for him. But it's not really working necessarily, I'd say, for Kenny Pickett. But he bolsters a very lackluster stat line with 1,616 passing yards, with 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I'll tell you what, that just does not sound good at all. If you haven't looked or guessed or even seen behind me, yes, I am a Steelers fan, but this is the truth right now. And he's been sacked 18 times this year, and that just kind of shows you our offensive line and how things are going right now with Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this is where things get weird. It's like the upside down. If you're fans of Stranger Things, this is the best theory I could think of. The upside down theory here. I just laid out some negative stats for you, but let's look at the plus side. And this is how things get weird with Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Since the beginning of last season, Kenny Pickett is number 2 in the NFL with most fourth quarter and overtime game-winning drives. You're like, really? And who's he behind? Kirk Cousins. So it's not like a Patrick Mahomes or anything like that. It's probably because he already has the lead in the fourth quarter. But you're looking at Kirk Cousins number 1 and Kenny Pickett number 2. But also, don't look now, but Kenny Pickett actually right now has the longest streak in the NFL since his last interception thrown. He has gone 147 pass attempts since his last interception, which was October 1st, which is the longest stretch currently in the NFL. And we're talking about Kenny Pickett here. So you're looking at those things, and then you're looking at the negative stats I had just given before, and it's like, well, that's not adding up. How are the Steelers 6-3? Well, I'll tell you what, they know how to win. They may be scraping the bottom of the barrel, but they know how to win. And that it begs to my next question here is, how do you prepare for a team like that you're going to outperform, you're going to outgain them easily, but you pick up the loss? So that's my question right there, is how do you prepare for a team like that? So I'm going to pass it over here to David. I mean, what do you feel when it comes to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they're doing this year?
Well, it's funny, Matthew, because I actually tweeted a few days ago. I think I said perhaps teams should stop trying to outgain the Steelers because clearly it has not been working so far. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, this this is really weird. But the truth of the matter is that we see this kind of stuff all the time. We see examples of teams who have no business winning, and yet they still do. I mean, I think we can recall the Vikings last year. They won 13 games, but they still had, I can't remember. It was either a negative point differential or they barely had a positive point differential. But the point being is that their point differential did not reflect on their actual record. So this kind of weirdness, this kind of chaos happens all the time, right? And I think the other thing we need to be asking is, if this happens like through one, two, or maybe even three games, you can call it a fluke. But through 9 games, you can't call it a fluke anymore. And it kind of begs the question: Is this has this been Mike Tomlin's best coaching job ever, or have the Steelers just been getting lucky? Or maybe it's both. And last point I'll make, Matthew, is it just seems like the Steelers are allergic to losing. They don't know what it's like to lose. I mean, they're a storied franchise, arguably the most storied franchise in the entire NFL. For the most part, they just don't know what it's like to lose.
Yeah, it seems like it's the story every year right now with Mike Tomlin. He's not bringing in out a 13-win season or 14-win. I mean, he's barely getting over 500 every year, but it still seems to always be the talk. Is this his best coaching season? And yes and no. I mean, some fans will say differently depending on how they feel, but we are getting wins just barely. And I will always say a win is a win, but how much of it does fall on the players or how much of it falls on the coach? And usually when you are the head coach, it all falls on you, whether it's a win or a loss, because you are the head coach, you are the commander, the leader. But it seems like it's always the topic every year, and I would much rather see a 13-win season. I'd love to see a complete team like you're seeing with, say, maybe the Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles right now, the Niners once they're healthy. But if we're pulling out wins and it continues to postseason, I will totally take it, especially as a Steelers fan. But Ed, I mean, do you agree with what David's saying? You want to add a couple things?
I think the idea that it's culture from the top, from ownership to GM to head coach, they are congruent and have been congruent since Mike Tomlin got there. I mean, the Steelers have had 3 coaches since 1969. That is an amazing consistency that you just don't see in the sports world today, no matter who you root for. So that all put together, Mike Tomlin was the right guy to replace Bill Cowher, and he has not posted a losing season since he took the reins. That is an incredible stat, especially with the longevity that Mike Tomlin's been there already, compared to every one of his equals in the coaching world. So I totally agree that you can't necessarily say that the Steelers are, getting lucky, because their culture is really bringing them along when they do not have the same horses that everybody, some other teams have around them.
Yeah, I agree. You have a coaching carousel that happens every single year where there's so much uncertainty. But I think with the culture that the Steelers have created with the longevity of their coaches, it shows why Mike Tomlin is still there, even if he hasn't had a losing season, but it feels like maybe he's just not the guy anymore. They continue to show faith in them, which could be a good thing, but a bad thing at the same time. I've always loved Mike Tomlin and what he brings to the Steelers. And I love that he's been here for as long as he has been. And I hope, someday that he does bring us another Super Bowl, because that is the goal every year. At least I would hope so as a head coach. That is your goal, to win a Super Bowl every year. So I do hope that he brings us back to glory when it comes to that. But speaking of back to glory, we've got a new number one team at the top. College football rankings just came out, and who's back up top, baby? That is the Georgia Bulldogs. We did see a flip with Ohio State and Georgia, and rightfully so, I might add. And some people may not like that. Some people will. Ultimately, things are going to play themselves out, especially with Ohio State and Michigan. But I think Georgia is now back on track. They've got that path set in front of them. They are undefeated. It's not like they lost, but back-to-back wins over ranked opponents with Missouri and now Ole Miss. I think Georgia Bulldogs are starting to look scary good again. And it's like, just like we doubted with Nick Saban with Alabama earlier, we are now seeing Georgia back on top.
Well, Matthew, who was not happy about Georgia being number one? Kirby Smart, because now he won't be able to use this respect anymore to motivate his players.
You can't please everyone. I mean, look, Michigan's probably happy they're not at number one either right now. I mean, they want all the fuel to the fire that they could have, and that does make things scary. And Kirby Smart has made that a point before. But yeah, to see them back on top, it does not shock or surprise me because of the spanking they put on Ole Miss this last weekend. And so they got a guy back named Brock Bowers, and I'll tell you what, if you guys don't know who Brock Bowers is, he is very, very good, and I'm talking about an elite NFL-ready tight end. He was NFL-ready tight end last year, and to get him back, it just shows how balanced that offense is. And Carson Beck, guys, Carson Beck, he's been their guy, and he's starting to look better and better every single week. I know we're a little late in the season when it comes to how Heisman rankings are, but I'll tell you what, a lot of people, if you are looking online, they've got Carson Beck up there, and they have him up there for a good reason. So this Georgia Bulldogs team, they've shown why they deserve to be there for the last couple years, and I think it's just only fitting that after these 2 wins that they are back on top. So, I mean, do you guys feel that Georgia should have overtaken Ohio State, or did you think Ohio State should be there?
Oh, I absolutely. I mean, even speaking as a Florida fan, I never understood why Georgia dropped from the top spot of the playoff rankings, because at the end of the day, they are the defending back-to-back national champions, and in order to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Yeah, and I want to go down just a little rabbit hole here, and I know Ed will be able to help me out here when it comes to this. But as far as changes on the top goes, I think I might have made one change, and there's been a lot of controversy online, and that is moving the number 5 Washington Huskies to number 4 over Florida State. Do you agree with that, Ed?
I do, because I sat there and watched those 2 teams play, and Washington, while their defense doesn't look stellar, their offense looks outstanding. So it can certainly make up for the difference between where they are in Florida State. Now, Florida State is a very solid team. There aren't a lot of holes in that team whatsoever. It's very complementary with how they get up and down the field, both on offense and defense. Washington is just way more explosive. They can put away teams a lot better than what Florida State can. And quite honestly, Washington has played better competition than what Florida State has. In the beginning of the year, they played LSU, which we know has a garbage defense, even though they have maybe the most explosive player in the country. That's a topic for the last episode. As well as playing Clemson, which they aren't who we thought they were when the rankings initially came out at the beginning of the season. Miami, we thought was going to be better than what they are at this point. So Florida State, they are undefeated. They are leading the ACC, but I don't think that they have really shown to be the number 4 team in the country versus what the Washington Huskies have done when they've beaten Oregon, they've beaten Utah. There's really been only one game in which, their quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., has looked human, and that was against Arizona State. So I do agree with you that Washington definitely has a argument to be made. But here we are, we're getting into the mid-November. That is all going to shake itself out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree it's going to shake itself out, but it just makes me wonder, how are they basing things off of? Because there have been games where Washington's offense looks human. Same with Florida State. I mean, Florida State, they came very close to losing to a Boston College team, and that is no dig to Boston College, but it's the same way that Arizona State was very close to doing that against Washington. So if you look at it, Florida State has beat one ranked opponent, and that was week 1 against LSU, whereas Washington has defeated 3 ranked opponents, if I am correct, with the wins over Arizona, Oregon, and then Utah. But it just makes me wonder how they're basing things off of. But like you said, things are going to shape out how it's going to be. But we've got a lot of one-loss teams there that are hoping to creep their way in, especially with conference championship wins. And David, you want to kind of tell the audience here these one-loss teams and who you think may be going in?
Yeah, so these are my ranking. This is my ranking of the one loss team. So I'm going to go from 5 through 1, and then I'm going to explain my reasoning. So number 5, I have Louisville. Number 4, I've got Tulane. 3, I've got Texas. 2, I've got Oregon, and number 1, I've got Alabama. All right. So why do I have Louisville behind Tulane, even though Louisville has played a tougher schedule than Tulane has? Well, guys, it's because Louisville has far and away the worst loss in this group, and I mean far and away, because they lost to a 2-8 Pitt team, and they didn't just lose, guys. They got beat down 38-21. That is an embarrassing loss. I mean, shout out to Louisville. Shout out to Jeff Brom. They're having a fantastic season overall in his first year there, but that is an atrocious loss, man. And so that's why I have Louisville ahead of Tulane. Texas is in the middle for me. I think Texas has, they've got some good wins, but no offense, Ed, but they have not impressed me that much. You guys have just been skating by teams. You're still winning.
I agree.
Yeah, you're still winning. That's all that matters, but they've just been skating by teams. And then finally, I think Oregon and Alabama are far and away the best one-loss teams in the country. And I think maybe you could argue that just through the eye test, Oregon has been the best one-loss team. But the reason why I have Alabama ahead of Oregon is because Alabama has played a tougher schedule. And they've beaten more ranked opponents than Oregon has. They've beaten 3 ranked opponents, whereas Oregon has only played, just one ranked opponent. So at this point, guys, I think the only one-loss team that you can pretty much guarantee will go to the playoffs is Alabama. The others, I don't think you can, guarantee at all. I think Texas will more than likely go to the Big 12 championship game. Yes. And I think Oregon will also more than likely go to the Pac-12 championship game. But as far as playoff locks, I mean, at this point, nobody is a lock per se, but I think the closest to a playoff lock at this point among the one-loss teams is Alabama. But Ed, what do you think?
I don't disagree so much as on 5 through 3. I would put Oregon ahead of Alabama just looking at those two teams playing. As I watch Oregon, they are putting teams away in a way that Alabama hasn't up until this past weekend against Kentucky. Jalen Milroe, he is kind of creeping his way as a second tier of those Heisman quarterbacks just because of how explosive he's been over the past 6 weeks. But overall, Bo Nix, that offensive line, their defense is suffocating. Oregon, just to me, has a better resume overall than what Alabama does, because Alabama did lose at home to Texas in week 2 of the season. And that's really the only thing that I will give credit for Texas getting that win, because there's a lot of people saying that there's no way Alabama gets into the playoff over Texas. And I say that there is a chance. As a Texas fan, I have watched this team. Alabama is playing better than Texas at this point. And at the end of the season, the eye test does matter. But overall, there could be a couple of non-conference champion teams that could go in above either Alabama or Texas when we get there. And I think that's part of the shaking out process of rivalry week as well as the championship games. So we'll see how it comes out. But yeah, my 2 cents is I would flip that 1 and 2.
Yeah, and you're seeing that logjam at 6, 7, 8, and the committee, they are using two different metrics on it. If you think about it, the reason why Auburn is not jumping Texas, or sorry, Alabama is not jumping Texas is because Texas beat them. But the reason Texas isn't jumping Oregon is because of the eye test when it comes to those two teams. So it does get a little tough right there, because if they're using both metrics, then it kind of contradicts each other. But like you said, I do think things will shape out later. And sometimes that eye test does mean a little bit more to the committee. But another team that isn't really being talked about, but if they are, it's not in the best way, and that is James Madison. And Ed, they are not bowl eligible, but is that why they're not in the top 25? What do you have to say about that?
Well, if you look at the AP poll, James Madison definitely is in that top 20 category. But when you're looking at the CFP rankings, college football playoff rankings, they're nowhere to be seen. And that is due to their ineligibility to be in a bowl game whatsoever. And the bylaw that they're quoting is bylaw 20.6.2.1.4 and the NCAA manual. That's a lot of points. The reason why this rule came about was it's more antiquated for old school styles that were programs that were jumping up a level. They knew it was going to take a few years before a team would be ready to compete at a bowl level. So they wanted to give that buffer time to get them settled into being in the new level. Well, JMU, James Madison University, has certainly proven themselves to be more than capable of playing at the higher level. Currently, they are undefeated, 10-0, 6-0 in the Sun Belt Conference, all but guaranteed their regular season East title, which they can't necessarily claim because they're not eligible based upon that bylaw. Their remaining schedule are the two teams that are behind them in the standings for the East title crown, and that's App State and Coastal Carolina. So what are some of the reasons why, beyond just the undefeated record, why you should be looking at James Madison? Their offense is number 22 in scoring in the country, number 15 in scoring differential, and number 27 in total offense. They are getting it done on that side of the ball. But on defense, it's just as good. They're 22 in defensive scoring at 19.9 points a game, number 33 in total defense, only allowing 338 yards a game, and number 1 in rush defense in the country at 61.6 yards a game, with 2.1 yards per carry being allowed. Now, as it stands now, the Sun Belt Conference title is going to be Troy in the West and Coastal Carolina in the East. And based upon the NCAA postseason waiver being rejected today, that's the way it's going to stay. This is a travesty to James Madison's program, their fans, everything with that school. And as far as the NCAA is concerned, there's no reason for this. They need to be able to play, even if it's not a New Year's Six bowl, they need to play a bowl because they've earned it 100%.
Absolutely. The team itself has earned it. And like you said, it is a travesty because you look at those numbers and what they have done on the field this year, they definitely deserve to be there. You're seeing a team like Tulane that's in there, but if this James Madison University team, which would be bowl eligible, they would overtake that Tulane team probably in the top 25. They deserve to be there. And that does play a big picture if you look at it next year, because we are expanding to a 12-team playoff. And within those rules, Tulane would make the playoff, being a non-Power 5 school, being in there, whereas James Madison would most likely be there. If that's how I understand how the rules are, James Madison would for sure be in there. So it is a travesty, and it's very unfortunate to see that happen. I do hope that they have this type of season next year because they deserve to be there.
And I do want to add something real quick. Just, huge kudos to the James Madison players and coaches, because when you're in a situation where you're ineligible for a bowl, it can be super easy to just be completely unmotivated and just, not care about winning, because it's like, well, what's the point of even playing or trying to win if we're not going to make a bowl game anyway? And yet here they are still winning, because clearly they all care about football, and they're doing it for the love of the game. So I think you have to give the coaches and players a lot of props for that, because I think a lot of teams would have folded, understandably so.
Yeah.
Agreed. And just one note, Tulane's one loss is to Ole Miss as a non-conference game. So they're playing just about as well as James Madison. James Madison wasn't able to get into non-conference games against Power 5 schools. So those two would be neck and neck. And in next year's playoff, with it being 12-team, James Madison does have to sit out another year because it's a 2-year turnaround on that bylaw to allow them into the playoff. Now, the only issue that I have with it is they started to petition for being in this year's bowl games halfway through this season as opposed to at the start of the season. Maybe if they step in at the start of the next season, that will be taken a little more seriously by the NCAA.
Yeah, and David brought up such a good point. There are so many instances where you just want to give up. You don't want to play because you're not playing for anything anymore, and that's could be banned from a bowl game, or that could be injuries. And speaking of, we in the NFL world did get breaking news today that Deshaun Watson is going to be out for the rest of the year. So that is a big injury right there, where the team itself could give up. They've already lost their star running back in Nick Chubb, who's a beast back there, and now you're losing your starting quarterback. That is a big hit and a big blow for the Browns team, because here we are halfway through the season and the Browns are not in last. They are not in last at all. They're actually tied for second in the division with the Pittsburgh Steelers, whereas the Cincinnati Bengals, and I didn't think I'd say that this year, but things could turn around. The Cincinnati Bengals are in last place. But this is where it's very interesting. The Cleveland Browns, they traded for Deshaun Watson during the middle of his legal issue happening with the Houston Texans and the civil suits playing out with the many women who accused him of some very lewd content. And they made him the highest paid guaranteed quarterback at the time. And that was crazy because, yes, he is a good quarterback, but in the middle of all this legal issues, the Browns decided to do what the Browns do best, and they acted out of impulse. And they decided to give the Texans everything that they can offer, and then give Deshaun Watson pretty much everything that they have in the bank. And it hasn't been what they've expected. And I'm going to use this for just an example here. Deshaun Watson has only started 12 games for the Browns since last year, and that'll be the same until the end of this year because he is out the rest of the year. But you know who's played every game since the beginning of this year, and that is C.J. Stroud for the Houston Texans. So in those 12 games that Deshaun Watson has played with the Browns, he has bolstered a below mid stat line with 2,217 passing yards, with 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Whereas CJ Stroud, in only 9 games in his rookie campaign, has put up 2,626 passing yards, 15 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. All I know is the Houston Texans are saying thank you. Thank you very much for this. And no, before I say anything else, the Texans did not get CJ Stroud with the Browns draft pick. That was based on their record the previous year. But I'll tell you who they did get in that Browns trade. They got Tank Dell, who is amazing. They got Will Anderson Jr., who was one of the best defensive players coming out of the draft. But they also get a first-round draft pick next year and a fourth-round draft pick. So this trade's not even over yet. And here's Deshaun Watson, who's out now for the rest of the year. So yes, injuries do come and go. They are unfortunate. But the Browns will always be a cursed franchise, and that just goes to show. I pray that Deshaun Watson does have a full recovery. I mean, it is in his throwing shoulder. He did break a bone within his throwing shoulder that is to be repaired. But the Browns organization, I feel like they just need to clear the whole house. They need to scratch they need to start from scratch. It just seems like anything that they do does not work out. And Deshaun Watson still has plenty of years left there, but it just seems that anything they do is a failure. I mean, you saw how high they were on Baker Mayfield, and look where that went. When they got Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry, two of the best duo receivers from LSU, until Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson came, and they did absolutely nothing there as well. They did make the playoffs. I will give them that, and I do like their coach, Kevin Stefanski, but they're just, like I said, they are a cursed franchise, and that is not the Steelers fan coming out in me. That is just a football fan. Anything the Browns have done over the last couple decades has just gone to shit. Yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. So, I mean, how'd you guys react when you saw the breaking news? I mean, does it shock you? I mean, and also with everything the Browns gave up for him, are you seeing that it is a failure now?
I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't shock me at all. And yeah, I think pretty much everyone, I would have to think that even Browns fans, when Cleveland gave him all that guaranteed money, they were probably thinking, what? Especially in the middle of his legal battle. It's just, like you said, the Browns being the Browns. But what's interesting, Matthew, is that you talk about how they need to kind of reset. And I feel like we hear this from the Browns every single year, or every 2 or 3 years or so. It's like it's always about resetting, restarting. Okay, and it's not like the Browns are devoid of talent. I mean, Myles Garrett is a beast. Nick Chubb, who I know is injured now, but we know that he's a beast as well. And Cleveland does have a good defense, so they've got the pieces. But it's funny, actually. This is hilarious because earlier we're talking about how the Steelers have a culture of winning. Well, it's the polar opposite with the Browns, because it seems like that they have a culture of losing. It's so baffling to me. What do you think, Ed?
It most certainly is. Ever since the original Browns team moved to Baltimore to become the Ravens, and the Browns were introduced back into the league because the city sued to keep all those records. They have just been just a rotating door of coaches and quarterbacks and running backs and every player imaginable. The only stalwart that they've had since they came back in the league was Joe Thomas, and he's going into the Hall of Fame. More so for just staying in Cleveland that long than actually doing a good job at tackle. But that's just kind of the way that they do things. Now, I did want to get a little further in the weeds, if I could, about the Deshaun Watson trade, because the Browns actually do get a 6th-round pick next year. But even though, Matthew, you did point out a couple of players, so far they have the Texans have received Kenyon Green, Will Anderson Jr., Damian Pierce, and Tank Dell with the 1st and 3rd pick next year. That is a tremendous haul for a team to receive for basically a single player. Now, the other part that is going to hamstring Cleveland for probably the rest of it, Deshaun Watson's playing days, overall is that contract. It's a 5-year, $230 million deal that is fully guaranteed. Over the first 2 years, it hasn't cost the Browns that much compared to the back half. So, like last year, Deshaun Watson received $9.39 million. This year, $19 million. But next year is when it really comes to fruition. He is set to make $64 million next year, which, if you're looking at the projection of the salary cap, that's going to put Cleveland $7 million over. Guess who cost $7 million? That's going to be somewhere on that defense that is keeping them in ball games to pay Deshaun Watson. And then they do it again in 2024 and then 2025. So that is a ton of money that they will not have to spend on players to build a winning culture. That is the big problem with Cleveland, is they mismanage their rosters so badly that they cannot put together a roster that works well for them to lead them into where they want to go. Now, looking at the details of this trade, I got to thinking, what is a worse trade than what this has become? And there's only one trade in all of NFL history that comes to my mind. And for my old heads out there, it's the Herschel Walker trade. It's the trade that started a dynasty. That was a trade in which the Cowboys received 4 players and 8 draft picks for a running back and 3 lower level draft picks. San Diego actually wound up with the running back that Minnesota had the year before. But the end result of that trade meant the Cowboys had 3 Super Bowl champions. They drafted Emmitt Smith, Russell Maryland, Kevin Smith, and Darren Woodson. The Vikings, 0 Super Bowl titles, and they drafted what wound up being a good second to third receiver in Jake Reed. So overall, I don't know if the Deshaun Watson trade is that bad, but there is a financial component to it now that just didn't exist in the NFL when that Herschel Walker trade hit. So in the end, it might be worse in this Deshaun Watson trade simply because it's going to hamstring them in the salary cap for years before they can build a roster because nobody's going to take on that much salary if they try and move Deshaun Watson. So they're going to wind up paying that fully guaranteed contract, and there's nothing they can do about it at this point. I mean, that's kind of where I stand with it. It was just one of those things where you look at it and go, why in the world did this happen? You know, what could be worse than this? Well, the Herschel Walker trade could have been worse than this. But, you know, we'll really see the end result of it over the next 5 to 10 years. But that's really just a pondering I had that I wanted to go over with you guys. Was there some other news that came out, David?
Yeah, to answer your question, Ed, there actually is more news. And if you guys haven't heard, the Buffalo Bills have fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. At first, this move wasn't exactly that surprising. The Bills have only been averaging about 21 points per game in their last 5 games. And a big reason for that is because of Josh Allen's struggles. He's thrown 11 interceptions, which leads the NFL, by the way, and he's thrown 7 interceptions in his last 6 games. The rushing offense, by the way, is totally fine. They're averaging 117 rushing yards per game, and they have 5 rushing touchdowns in their last 5 games. So rushing is not the problem, right? Now, on one hand, I can understand the firing because when you're a Super Bowl contender and going into the season, the Bills were a clear Super Bowl contender, right? So when you're a Super Bowl contender and your offense isn't performing up to standards, then changes need to be made. Now, that being said, I can't help but also feel like this is a bit of a panic move because let's remember, Ken Dorsey started off as Buffalo's quarterbacks coach. And the year before he came in, Josh Allen struggled pretty mightily in his rookie year. Now, granted, a lot of quarterbacks struggle in their rookie years, so maybe that's not a big deal. But I don't think it's a coincidence that as soon as Dorsey came in, that Josh Allen transformed into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Well, he might not be one of the best right now, but the point is that he has transformed clearly under Ken Dorsey. So I don't know, like maybe Dorsey was just never ready for the offensive coordinator position, but also at the same time, I think, listen, these players are professionals, right? And it feels like every time a team wins, the players get all the credit in the world and the coaches don't get enough credit. But anytime a team loses or a team is doing bad, then it's like, fire everybody, fire the coaches. We need to start over. But guys, these are professional players. At some point, they have to take responsibility for their poor play. All right. And I'm not saying that Josh Allen hasn't taken responsibility for his poor play so far. I'm sure he's very hard on himself more than anybody else right now. But like I said, he's a professional at the end of the day. These are professionals at the end of the day, and you can't always put the blame on coaches when they're putting these players in position to succeed and the players just aren't executing. So that's my 2 cents on it. I can understand, the reasoning for it, but it also just feels like Sean McDermott trying to save his own ass here. But what do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I don't recognize this Buffalo Bills team, and I feel like Ken Dorsey getting the axe is maybe a little bit premature, but it could be compensating because of how horrible this team looks. I mean, you could kiss Stephon Diggs goodbye. I mean, I think he's already had his issues there, but that kind of comes with who he is too. I mean, you saw what happened in Minnesota, but he's gone. I hate to say it because I really like him and Josh Allen together, but I feel like it's almost certain that he's going to be on a different team come next year. But this Buffalo Bills team, I did not see this coming. Some may have, but I sure as heck didn't. And last year you saw them trying to get better at the trade deadline, and they did deal with injuries, especially with Von Miller on defense, and of course the very scary incident that happened in Cincinnati with DeMar Hamlin. But it's just unrecognizable what's happening with this Buffalo Bills team. I really like Josh Allen, and he is on one of the elites of the quarterbacks in the NFL. But to see what happened over here to Ken Dorsey is just, I feel like it's not fair. I feel like they should have given him more time, but maybe they just feel like they had already did and they had him on a short leash for some reason. But I'm interested to see where this team goes from there and see if they could these bridges that they might have burned with Stephon Diggs and some other players, if they could rebuild them. But Ed, I mean, do you kind of see it going down the same trail?
I do. And to go back to David's point, this does feel like a panic move because Ken Dorsey has actually been a pretty good play caller for the Buffalo Bills over his first 2 seasons. They've been top 10 in points scored. The problem has been the interceptions. It isn't just about the other team scoring those points. It's the loss of points of your own offense. And at some point, this is McDermott pulling the James Franklin and taking all the blame by firing his OC, by firing somebody else. And overall, it's not going to help for this season. But I do think that it was a move just to appease the fan base, to have somebody take responsibility that wasn't the golden child of Josh Allen or McDermott. If somebody had to, take their ball and go home because of the way the offense has looked over the first half of the season. So I do think it's a panic move. I do think that it was a bit unfair. And you're right, Stephon Diggs, he's very frustrated right now. And he's got friends of his that are tweeting at him telling him to get out of that place, just out in public, and he's responding to those. So right then and there that Stephon Diggs will not be there next season, no matter how much money they try and throw at him, because it's a matter of his own pride of, I'm the one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, so I should be able to be featured like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And for the first few seasons of him being in Buffalo, he was, but with the way the end of this year goes, we'll see how it goes forward, where he winds up next year, because they're not going to move on from Josh Allen. He's too good of a player. He's definitely top 10, because there's no quarterback that I would want below 9 or 10 other than Josh Allen. So that's kind of where it sits with that.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a photo a few years ago that went viral? It was a photo of I don't remember if it was the divisional game or if it was the AFC Championship, but there's a photo of Stephon Diggs kind of like out on the field by himself, looking at the Chiefs players celebrating. And of course, the story behind it was like, oh, he's clearly motivated, like he's going to be motivated to push his team even further. And well, look what's happening now.
There's only so much a wide receiver could do, and I respect that. I mean, you're looking at a player and his maturity of staying out there. A lot of people, if you see a player out there still, it's because they're crying, they're emotional, they just lost the big game. But he left it all out there on the field, and I love seeing that. Huge respect to him when it comes to that. But unfortunately, that offense, that it's just not the same anymore, and they really may not be on the same playing level. And there was a movie, it was my favorite movie growing up, and I know a lot of people who watch this movie, and it's called Heavyweights, and they had a quote in there, and all I could think of was this, and it was, Sean McDermott caved like the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. And that's exactly how it is he caved. He saw this Bills Mafia out there jumping on tables, probably drew his face on there, and he was like, I got to do something. These guys are going to kill me. And, well, we're going to get rid of Ken Dorsey. And I still feel like that's pretty much exactly what happened. A little exaggerate there, but he caved indeed, just like the Buffalo Bills did in the Super Bowl. So, but we've had a lot of breaking news here, and we have a little breaking news here for you fans out there, and that is us introducing a new segment to the show. And I'm going to leave this over here to David Street. Let the fans know what they're in store for here, David.
Yes, guys. So we are introducing a new segment called Streets Corner, where I just basically give my opinion and give my take on things. And if you can't tell, I'm a very opinionated person. I don't apologize for it. I tell you what I think, whether you like it or not, right? So, I would assume that everybody now at this point knows about the tragic incident that happened, during the middle of a English ice hockey game when Adam Johnson died after taking a skate to the throat. Miraculously, he was still able to skate it off, I think, but then he was pronounced dead later at the hospital. Right now, the UK isn't releasing the name of. Well, there has been a man who was arrested, but the UK isn't releasing his name, and I'm not surprised by that. I could be wrong on this guy, so don't quote me, but I think they have a law where they don't release the name of the guy who got arrested until further along. But just know that the law here in the United States is very much different from the law in the UK. But I think just based on what we know, I think it's safe to assume that the guy who got arrested was Matt Petgrave. Now I've seen people on social media and all over the place saying that, like, oh, Petgrave feels bad. Like, why are you doing this to him? Like, he already feels terrible enough. And you know what? I'm sure that Petgrave does feel bad about what he did. I don't have any doubts about that. And I just want to say that I don't think Petgrave is a murderer, right? Because not every kill equates to murder. Like, if someone, killed somebody in self-defense and his or her life was in clear danger, well, they're not committing murder. They're exercising something in which they had no other choice. Murder is premeditated. And I don't think that Petgrave woke up that morning looking to kill somebody. I don't think he was thinking, you know what, I'm going to go kill somebody. But I think he did have an intention to hurt somebody. And if you look at the video, and by the way, out of respect, for our audience members who are very squeamish to blood, we're not going to post the link to the video. But you can just search it on YouTube. It's out there. Just be warned, it's very, very graphic and disturbing, right? But if you look at the video, there is a third player involved, but even so, you could tell that Petgrave was not being interfered with. His leg wasn't tangled up. He made that distinct kicking motion all on his own. So while I don't think he was looking to, kill Johnson, I do think he was looking to harm him, and it just ended in the worst, in the worst possible way. And people will argue that it's a freak accident. They'll say, well, what about all the other ice hockey players who died because of freak accidents? Should the players that caused those deaths be arrested as well? And let me just say this, all right? Hockey is a tough sport, okay? It's a man's sport. I think most people know that. And when you're an ice hockey player, you always have to assume that somebody is out to get you. You always have to play with your, with your heads up, because enforcers, they are part of the game. And I promise you, no team has ever won a Stanley Cup without an enforcer. They are a crucial part of the team. But there's ways that you can be rough within the elements of the game. Like, if you lay a hit on somebody with your shoulder, you lay a hit on somebody who has the puck with your shoulder to shift the momentum in your team's favor, that's hockey right there, okay? That happens all the time, right? But what I can tell you is that raising your leg and using your skate, and by the way, guys, the blade of a skate is insanely sharp. Like, it is so incredibly sharp. Raising your leg in that distinct motion, okay, that is not a hockey play at all. And in all my years of watching hockey, other than instances where players got tangled up, I have never seen any player make a move like that. And I am just so damn sick and tired of people trying to paint Matt Petgrave like he's the victim. I got in a little argument on Twitter with a fellow Lightning fan, and then she proceeded to block me. But people trying to paint him like he's a victim here, like, oh, he didn't mean to kill him, he didn't mean for him to die. Listen, there's definitely some instances where I didn't mean to kill him can definitely work. Like, an example could be if you're driving at night in the middle of a snowstorm, and there's someone in the middle of the road wearing all black clothing, and you don't see him until literally the last second, and you slam your brakes and the guy dies. And come to think of it, I think that actually did happen with Jim Boeheim of Syracuse, if I remember correctly. So that's a case where someone died because of you, but it was a freak accident and there was nothing you can do about it, right? But then there are instances where I didn't mean for him to die, just doesn't work. Like, Matthew, like, what if you piss me off one day and I punch you square in the face, you get knocked unconscious, and then you die? Your wife, her family confronts me. Do you think I'll just be able to say, well, I didn't mean to kill him? No, that doesn't work, because sure, I didn't mean to kill you, right? But here's the thing. In one incident, I wasn't even looking to harm somebody. That was truly a freak incident that there was nothing I could do. But in the other incident, I didn't mean to kill somebody, but I did harm somebody, right? And when somebody dies because of your actions, you need to be held accountable. So again, let me just say that I don't think Petgrave is a murderer, okay? And I don't think his life should be ruined, but I do think he needs to be held accountable for what he did, and he should never be allowed to play hockey again. And that is the Streets Corner.
I couldn't agree anymore, David. It is happening over in the UK. Here in America, you are innocent until proven guilty, unless your name's Jim Harbaugh. But he is innocent until proven guilty. But we have all seen the videos. I am an avid hockey fan, and you see hockey players fall, trip every single game. Do you see them sweet chin music like Shawn Michaels and then WWE to a player? No, you do not. This isn't Blades of Glory with Will Ferrell, okay? You rarely see a hockey blade, a skate up near an opponent's face like that. The only time that ever happens is if they are on the ground, they both fell down together. But yes, you can slip, you can fall, you could even high stick with your hockey stick, but it doesn't happen like this did. This is a different scenario. I don't think he intended to kill him. Do I think he intended to hurt him? I'd say so. I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. He does have a history of playing dirty when it comes to this, but that's not up to me to decide. I am just a fan. But as far as Streets Corner goes, David, I think you hit the nail right on the coffin there. I think it was perfect, and I think that he should be found guilty. Do I think he came out to murder him? I do not. But like I said, I am not the judge. I am not the jury. I am just a fan. All respect and condolences go out to Adam Johnson, his family, and I not saying I hope they get the justice that they deserve, but I do hope that peacefully things get better within their family, especially on a loss that tragic like that, and the players that had to see it as well. But what do you think, Ed?
Well, it reminds me of an incident that did happen in the NHL years ago, where there was a stick that was slashed. I believe it was Bertuzzi, an incident. Uh, that is the only incident that I can think of to even correlate to something of this magnitude. Uh, and it had to be a stick to do it. It wasn't a skate. And looking at the video, and I've seen the replays several times. What I have seen on it is he's apparently trying to create a blockade for Johnson to keep him from getting to the center of the ice. Well, when he does that, he goes to make a kicking motion like he's going to wrap his leg around him, and when Johnson is not there the way he thinks he's going to be, that's when things take a turn for the worse. There really is nothing that you can say to make the situation any better. At this point, we have to let due process take its toll, and just kind of hope that Johnson's family does well, and hope the courts do what's right by the laws that are in the UK at this point.
Yeah, last year, and I could be wrong on the player. I want to say it might have been Ryan Reeves, but he had a freak accident actually happen on the ice last year where an opponent's skate did actually hit his wrist and sliced his wrist open. And this was a very serious issue. You saw it immediately. He knew what happened. He covered it up. He actually skated and ran off the ice where he had to be, he seeked a medical attention and brought to a local hospital where they did have to seal that back up because it was not a pretty scene where his wrist was sliced. He could have bled out almost immediately, but acting like he did, it saved his life, and he was actually able to play later on, but that year. But that's how scary it is. And I know they do take, there is a liability out there when you go out on the ice. And just like you guys said, those skates are like knives. They are very, very sharp. And you saw it if you have watched this video, which it is very graphic. And if you play back to last year on the injury I just said, you're going to see it as well. They've got padding there, but that meant nothing for his wrist and forearm. It went right through that too. So that's just how it is. You do assume a liability, but you just hope it isn't that much of a liability that there is death, but it can happen, and we have seen it in front of our eyes. But what else we have seen is it is award season right now. It is award season with the MLB. Yes, the World Series is over. Yes, the Rangers won, but they're still handing out these awards. There are trophies. There are plaques to be made, and Ed's going to tell us about several of these awards that have been announced so far. So Ed, go ahead and tell us what have we seen?
Yeah, let's get on to some happier things, and let's hand out some flowers, if you will, because this week you're seeing a lot more of the end of the year awards being handed out. It started earlier this week with the Rookie of the Year awards. For the 5th time in MLB history, we have 2 unanimous Rookie of the Year award winners. In the American League, it's Gunnar Henderson. He is the shortstop from Baltimore Orioles. His slash numbers for the year were 255, 325, and 489. He had a 6.2 wins above replacement record, which is outstanding. He's the first Oriole to win the award since Greg Olson did it in 1989. So you're looking at 34 years since the last time that an Oriole won this. And being that he's a shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles, I just thought it was a very cool thing that Cal Ripken Jr. was the one to hand the award to him to announce it. They weren't in the same room. They were doing very much a Zoom type meeting, but the fact that it's almost like a passing of the torch of great Oriole shortstops. So I thought that was a very cool thing for him to do. In the National League, you had Corbin Carroll, the outfielder for the Arizona Diamondbacks. His slash line was 285, 362, 506, and 5.4 wins above a replacement. Now, he is a player that the Diamondbacks have been developing for several years now. He didn't get to play in the COVID season. Last year, he had some shoulder issues, so he did not get to make his major league debut until after August 1st, which made him eligible to play this year as a rookie. And just a note, with less than 100 days of major league service, the Arizona Diamondbacks think so highly of him that they've already extended his contract to an 8-year, $111 million contract. That is a record for a player with that few days in the major leagues. So congratulations to both of those rookies. We're looking to see, big things from both of them. And I do want to point out that the Yankees had a rookie shortstop get the Gold Glove last week. So that's going to be very interesting seeing two of the teams in the AL East with young talent that is developing right before our eyes. And we should see them in those uniforms for a very long time. Now, I'm moving on to the Manager of the Year award, which was announced just yesterday. And the American League, you had Brandon Hyde, who, lo and behold, is the manager for Gunnar Henderson. It's amazing what happens when you have good players to play for you. The Baltimore Orioles record was the best in the American League at 101-61. That is 18 game improvement from 2022. That's a huge difference. And they won the AL East by 2 games. So it had been a while since they had done that well. With the National League, Skip Schumacher of the Miami Marlins, they had an 84-78 record, which was a 15 game improvement from 2022. Here's the one that I really love on this. They made the playoffs. How long has it been since we've heard Marlins and playoffs in the same sentence? It has been forever.
Well, didn't they make it during the COVID year?
And last time I remember them being in the playoffs, I'm sorry?
Didn't the Marlins make it?
What was that, David?
Yeah. Didn't the Marlins make it during the COVID year?
I do not have the records on that. So
okay, but you are right. Like it
they may have, but in the bubble bubble year, that it kind of has an asterisk in my mind. So I did not quite keep that with the rest of the records. But there have been a couple other awards that were announced just this evening. Matthew, were you able to take a look at that breaking news?
Yeah, breaking news before we got on, we saw the Cy Young winners announced, and that was Garrett Cole in the American League and Blake Snell in the National League. And Garrett Cole, I mean, you've heard his name for a while now. He's always been atop of the best pitchers in the game. But believe it or not, this was only his first Cy Young that he won, and won it unanimously. And he won it over the likes of Sonny Gray, Kevin Gausman, who ever since he's kind of resurrected his career. He came to the Giants just a couple years ago and then only was there for 1 year, and he did amazing with the Giants, and then went to Toronto where he's put up huge numbers. But Garrett Cole finally rightfully deserving his Cy Young award. And, he had a campaign a couple years ago where I feel like he should have won it, but his teammate Justin Verlander, when he was on the Astros, ended up winning it. But when it comes down to those two, I mean, you could flip a coin. I mean, that's just how good they both are. But with the National League, Blake Snell, this is his second time that he won it, whereas he had won it before with the Tampa Bay Rays. And, now I look at it, I mean, that's David's team right there, Tampa Bay. And then you had Garrett Cole with Houston, which is Ed's baseball team. So, I mean, you're seeing that these players, they are going to other teams, but they're still excelling and they're still doing what they can. And Blake Snell, who looks like he may be leaving the Padres, I mean, that's kind of up in the air, but to come off of this huge year that he had with the Padres, who didn't do the best of their ability as a team with all the players they got over the offseason, with picking up Xander Bogaerts, you got Juan Soto from last year. Tatis came back. I mean, you picked up a lot of great players, but their pitching still shined with Blake Snell. And I think adding that to his resume, a second one, is just only going to bolster the teams that are going to want him. I think that he is one of the top pitchers in the league when he's at his best, and we were able to see that this year. But he beat out Logan Webb, who plays for the San Francisco Giants, who has a mean sinker, and Zach Gallen, who just was in the World Series, and we were able to see what he was able to do. He is an incredible talent that I feel like we are going to see his name in the top 3 finalists for the Cy Young for years to come. So to beat them as well is just as impressive. So huge congrats out to both Garrett Cole and Blake Snell for their Cy Young Award wins. But I'm interested to see if they're able to repeat it next year. I think Garrett Cole, those expectations are always up there. And Blake Snell, if he does leave to another team, expect him to be their number 1 pitcher. And hopefully he'll be bringing the same exact mentality of winning that Cy Young again. But that's what I have as far as the rest of the awards go. MVP's coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. I mean, Ohtani, you're seeing his name always kind of going to be up in the discussion, just like Mike Trout all those years. You're seeing Ohtani right there too, but he could be on a new team, speaking of. So keep an eye out on that. I always am, and I know if you guys are sports fans like me, you're going to be out there checking Twitter. You're going to be looking everywhere. All right, who's going where, because there's always something happening. And that's what I love about sports, is we always have that to look forward to. Head on a swivel. That's what I'll always teach everyone in any aspect of life. Always have your head on a swivel. I remember that as my first coaching lesson when I played cornerback and safety, is you got to have your head on a swivel, and that aspect works on everything. So it's about all we have today, folks. We appreciate you guys tuning in like you do. Please hit that like, subscribe button, and share. Word of mouth is always appreciative. Let people know we got a new show going on. It is wonderful what these guys are doing, and we really appreciate that. And let us know what you guys feel within the comments, whether it's pros, cons, bad or negatives. I mean, we love to hear everything that you have to say. Your opinion always matters. So let us know who you feel like Ohtani is going to go to, or who you feel like should have won maybe one of those awards. So we love to hear it. But till next time, we are rounding third, and we are headed for home. Thank you, guys.